Officer Thomas Keller faces a turning point when Black FBI Director Selena Royce intervenes to stop him from bullying a black teenager. Instead of backing down, Keller retaliates by having her home destroyed. He doesn't know that Selena is more than just a woman. She's the director of the FBI. Now she's set to hold him accountable for his racist actions. As Keller confronts the consequences of his behavior, Selena's relentless pursuit of justice begins. Will he recognize his misconduct before it's too late? Stay tuned, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Selena Royce, as the director of the FBI, saved the boy. Days after the confrontation, she returned home from a security meeting to find a demolition notice stapled to her front door. This property must be demolished within 48 hours. There were no violations. The stamp was real. And the threat, it was all too real. She rushed to the city planning department, demanding answers. But the woman at the front desk only offered a fake smile and a fake voice, saying, "We're just following procedures." Still, Selena did not back down. She began calling in favors, digging through old city records, trying to trace who had filed the anonymous complaint. And then it hit her. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't just one officer with a grudge. This was a system. And the system had declared war on her. She reached out to her old partner, Marcus, a brilliant former agent whose house had been destroyed years ago by a fraudulent order. Together, they started connecting the dots. Zoning violations, property seizures, evictions. All targeting black families, all part of a much bigger operation. But as Selena pushed harder, the system went back. One morning, she opened her blinds and froze. Bulldozers, patrol cars. Brian Carter, the officer she had confronted, stood across the street, arms folded, smirking. She walked outside calmly, her heart thudding like a war drum. "We're just following orders," he said with a sneer, holding up a fake legal document. She could see the forged stamp from where she stood. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She watched. She watched as her walls crumbled, her windows shattered, her life reduced to rubble. The neighbors watched too. Some filmed in silence. Some cried, but no one stopped it. And at that moment, Selena promised not to rebuild, but to fight. She moved quickly after that, filed a federal investigation, called in trusted allies. She found Vanessa Tran, an investigative journalist who had been chasing the same trail: illegal demolitions, shady land deals, dirty money. Vanessa handed over a folder thicker than a case file, and in it were names, dates, numbers, proof. But with evidence came danger. One night, Marcus's car was run off the road by a semi. He survived, barely. A day later, Vanessa's apartment was set on fire. She escaped with her laptop clutched to her chest. They were sending a message: stop or suffer. Still, Selena began calling in favors, digging through old city records, trying to trace who had filed the anonymous complaint. She reached out to her old partner, Marcus, a brilliant former agent whose house had been destroyed years ago by a fraudulent order. Together, they started connecting the dots. Brian Carter, the officer she had confronted, stood across the street, arms folded, smirking. "We're just following orders," he said with a sneer, holding up a fake legal document. She could see the forged stamp from where she stood. She watched as her walls crumbled, her windows shattered, her life reduced to rubble. The neighbors watched too. Some filmed in silence. She filed a federal investigation, called in trusted allies. She found Vanessa Tran, an investigative journalist who had been chasing the same trail: illegal demolitions, shady land deals, dirty money. Vanessa Marcus's car was run off the road by a semi. A day later, Vanessa's apartment was set on fire. Still, Mayor Gerald Benson turned Larksville into a machine of quiet violence, Sniper fire. Broad daylight. She felt the bullet graze her shoulder, felt Marcus throw himself in front of her to take the second shot. She screamed as he collapsed, his blood soaking into her hands. His last words, "Don't stop." She didn't. 3 days later, she stood before Congress with every file, every recording, every thread of evidence. And when she played the audio of Mayor Benson ordering her house to be destroyed, the nation listened. "Tear it down," he said. "Let them see what happens when they forget their place." The silence in the chamber afterward was heavy. Then came the rage. Across the country, protests exploded. People demanded justice not just for Selena, but for Marcus, for Vanessa, for the countless families whose homes were stolen in silence. The arrests came next: Carter, Benson, the police chief, the planning director. Developers who once smiled on magazine covers now walked in chains. Selena watched each trial, never flinching, never looking away. And when the judge sentenced Benson to life without parole, she felt something shift. Not peace, not victory, but clarity. The system could bleed. Months later, her home was rebuilt. But not for her. It became a community center, a place for the people the system had tried to erase. On opening day, she stood before the crowd and said nothing, just held up 2 photographs, her father and Marcus. And yet, even now, Selena knows this is not the end. Somewhere, in a dark car, a man watches her. He calls her a national threat. He smiles like it's not over, because it isn't. But Selena Royce has faced fire, bullets, and betrayal, and she's still standing. What would you do if the system tried to erase you? Would you run, or would you rise? If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. This is not just a story. This is a call. Justice doesn't sleep, and neither will we. Threats poured in, anonymous letters, slashed tires, even a brick through the temporary office's window with a note attached. "You're next." But what shook her most wasn't the threats. She canceled all public events. She kept the lights off at night, always listening, always watching. One evening, she noticed Vanessa hadn't replied to any messages. She drove through rain-slicked streets, heart pounding, only to find Vanessa's apartment door wide open. Inside, everything had been ransacked. Files missing, laptops gone. No sign of a struggle, but no sign of Vanessa either. Selena called it in and mobilized federal support, but deep down, she knew that this was a warning. She arranged an emergency congressional hearing, presenting every detail: money laundering, bribes, and fake zoning orders. She forced the country to look. But as soon as the cameras turned off, she was warned, not by criminals, but by officials. "You've made powerful enemies, Director Royce. Be careful." It was their way of saying, "We saw what you did, and we won't forget." Days later, Vanessa turned up alive. Barely. She had been dumped at a bus station, bruised, cold, and silent. She didn't speak for a day. When she finally did, she said, "They said if I talked again, they'd burn down everything." Selena took her hand and whispered, "Then let them try." But her strength came at a cost. The Bureau's Internal Oversight Committee summoned her. They questioned her objectivity, her judgment, her leadership. They asked if she had let personal feelings cloud her duty. She looked them in the eye and asked, "Is defending the innocent a conflict of interest now?" The silence that followed said everything. She walked out of that meeting knowing her days as director were numbered. The next blow came quietly. A report leaked. False allegations. She claimed she had used her position for personal revenge. Every major news outlet ran the headline, "Has the FBI director gone too far?" Public support wavered. Protesters once chanted her name, but now they hesitated. Sponsors of the investigation withdrew. Selena sat in her car late one night, parked outside the ruins of her old home, her hands trembling around the steering wheel. She thought of Marcus, of her father, of Vanessa, of every family that had lost their home, their dignity. And she thought, maybe the system doesn't fear truth. Perhaps it only fears those who dare to survive it. But then came a letter. A handwritten note slid under her temporary office door. No return address. No stamp. Just 5 words scrawled across the center in bold black ink. Don't stop. We see you. And something inside her broke, not in defeat, but in release. The pain, betrayal, and silence were no longer weights. They were fuel, and Selena Royce, broken, bruised, and battle-weary, stood up again, not as an agent of the Bureau, but as a woman who had lost nearly everything and still refused to surrender. And when she stepped into the courtroom weeks later, facing those who tried to destroy her, she didn't speak for herself. She said for every person the system had silenced. And that's what makes her different. If you've made it this far, you know this story isn't fiction. It's a reflection. A call. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone like Selena is still fighting, and they need to know they're not alone. Selena Royce stood before the courtroom. Facing her from across the courtroom were Gerald Benson and Brian Carter, the 2 men who had orchestrated the destruction of her home, the murder of her friend, and the terror inflicted on countless black families. No more hiding. No more silence. Selena spoke, not with anger, but with pain sharpened into purpose. You didn't just kill my partner, she said softly. You tried to kill the idea that someone like me could ever stand up to someone like you. Then she played the final audio. Benson's voice ordered her house's destruction with gleeful malice. The courtroom fell silent, and Benson's smug expression crumbled into a pale mask of fear. As the verdicts were read, life for Benson, 25 years for Carter, Selena didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. And as the gavel struck, she silently whispered to them, "We are still here." In the following weeks, Selena walked through neighborhoods once silenced by fear and met families who embraced her not as a director, but as a sister, a survivor, a symbol of hope. She used her own hands to help rebuild the homes that had been taken. And then she turned her rebuilt house, the one Carter had tried to destroy, into a justice center. The walls that once held her dreams now held the dreams of thousands. But even as she gave speeches, had mothers who cried in her arms, and listened to children talk about where they would plant flowers in their new front yards, she knew this fight was far from over. And you, yes, you listening, can be part of that fight. If you believe in Selena's courage, if her story moved you, if you felt her pain, strength, and press that like button right now, drop a comment to encourage her. Share this with someone who needs to see that even when the system breaks your bones, you can rise, rebuild, and fight. Selena Royce didn't just survive. She turned pain into power. And with your support, her fight becomes all of ours. Don't let her stand alone. Like, comment, and subscribe, because justice lives when we stand together. After the courtroom victory, most people expected Selena Royce to step back, rest, heal, and maybe even disappear from public view. But Selena had other plans. The world didn't know that even as Benson and Carter sat behind bars, the map she and Marcus had once built, the web of corruption and cover-ups, was still only partially uncovered. Too many names were missing. Too many unanswered questions haunted her dreams. And so, with the media frenzy dying down and the nation turning to the following big headline, Selena quietly disappeared from the spotlight. One day, she was speaking at a housing justice conference. And the next, her calendar went blank. No press, no appearances. Not even her closest allies knew where she went. What she was doing, however, was nothing short of unbelievable. Under aliases, Selena began infiltrating secret auctions, underground real estate exchanges where entire blocks of black-owned property were traded like poker chips between international investors. In one such meeting, in a windowless room beneath a luxury hotel in Dubai, she posed as an oil consultant from the Midwest, her FBI credentials tucked far out of sight. She watched as masked bidders raised paddles to win ownership over stolen homes in American cities, their voices cold, their laughter cruel. No one knew who she was, until one man did. A developer from New York, graying and arrogant, whispered in her ear as she walked past, "Larksville was just a warm-up. You think you made a dent?" Selena didn't flinch. She leaned closer, smiled, and whispered, "Check your accounts tomorrow. You'll find out how deep the dent goes." That night, with the help of an old friend in cyber forensics, she orchestrated a whole digital raid on the auction firm. The following day, every account tied to illegal land grabs was frozen. International press picked up on it instantly, calling it an anonymous cyber strike. No one connected it to her. Not yet, but that wasn't the end. Her journey took her to abandoned neighborhoods in Detroit, secret data vaults in Toronto, and even an underground network of whistleblowers in Mexico City who had their own stories of land theft and gentrification violence. She carried with her a worn leather notebook, Marcus's notebook, the one he'd started years ago. On every page were questions, patterns, names with question marks, and now she was filling in the blanks. She uncovered a shell company in the Cayman Islands that was connected directly to U.S. political figures who had voted against housing reform bills. She exposed a U.S.-based nonprofit that claimed to help rebuild communities, but in truth was laundering demolition funds into private real estate portfolios. She didn't do this for glory. She didn't even do it to be seen. She did it because the system hadn't just taken her home and tried to take her silence, and that she could never give. Along the way, she helped rescue 3 immigrant families on the verge of losing their homes, aided an elderly war veteran whose property had been marked for auction after a forged signature appeared on his deed, and exposed a hidden clause buried in a state development law that allowed black cemeteries to be rezoned for commercial use. But each step she took also brought new danger. Her name was placed on international watch lists. A bounty was issued in secret circles, $250,000, for anyone who could shut her down permanently. She once woke up in a safe house in Atlanta to find the windows shattered and a red X painted on the wall above her bed. She knew she was being hunted. And yet she pressed on. No fear, no retreat. Now, months after vanishing, rumors are swirling. Has she gone rogue? Is she building something new? Whispers say she's assembling a shadow team. A new generation of defenders, lawyers, hackers, survivors like herself, trained not by policy manuals, but by pain, experience, and truth. They call themselves the Groundkeepers, and their mission is simple: reclaim stolen land, rewrite forgotten history, and dismantle corruption one city at a time. So if you're still listening, here's what you need to know. Selena Royce didn't just survive corruption. She's chasing it into the world's darkest corners, and she needs you watching, supporting, and encouraging. Leave a comment below to let her know you're with her. Hit that like button to show the system she's not alone. What she's doing is dangerous, bold, and nearly impossible, but then again, that's always been her style. There was a moment, brief, almost invisible, when Selena Royce stood barefoot in the ruins of her demolished home, the dust still floating through the morning air, her eyes fixed on the spot where her father's photograph used to hang. In that silence, something broke inside her. Not her spirit, but the last belief that the system could protect her. Like many of us, she had once believed that rising high enough would grant her safety. If she worked harder, spoke softer, and stayed composed, she could outrun the pain her community had endured for generations. But on that cold morning, after a white officer with a personal vendetta used forged orders to bulldoze her home in front of stunned neighbors and silent police, Selena realized that even the director of the FBI couldn't outrun racism. It had all started with that one brave moment, the night she stepped in to defend a terrified black boy from a white cop with his hand on a gun and hatred in his eyes. The boy had done nothing but forget his keys. The officer had done everything but fire. Selena's intervention, her refusal to stay silent, made her a threat, and the system does not forgive threats. What followed was not just retaliation. It was an attack on her existence. Zoning violations appeared overnight. Legal orders came without signatures. Her house, the one she had built after years of chasing justice, was declared illegal and marked for destruction. And no one came to help. Not the mayor who once hugged her, not the colleagues who once praised her. The system circled its wagons and left her standing alone. But she didn't fall. She didn't beg. She rose again and again. With Marcus Reed by her side, and later with Vanessa Tran, she uncovered a network of corruption that went deeper than she imagined. Black families across Larksville and beyond were being pushed out under the false promise of urban renewal. Homes stolen, voices silenced. All of it was approved with a smile by men in power who saw people like her as nothing but barriers to profit. They tried everything to stop her. They ran Marcus off the road. They firebombed Vanessa's apartment. They sent snipers to silence her. One bullet grazed her shoulder. The second was meant for her heart, but Marcus jumped in the way. He died in her arms, whispering, "Don't stop." And she didn't. Because by then, this wasn't just about her home or her pain. It was about justice for generations of silence. She walked into Congress with blood still fresh on her memory, and she exposed every lie, every payment, every recorded conversation. She made the nation listen, and when the world heard the mayor's voice ordering her house torn down as punishment, they finally saw what she had lived through. The verdicts came swiftly. Life for Benson. 25 years for Carter. But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Selena used the rubble of her home to build something more significant. A justice center. A place where families found hope again, where children learned their history, where justice had a face. And though she carries scars, visible and hidden, she remains unshaken. So if you've followed her journey, from the racist slur in a quiet neighborhood to the courtroom where she reclaimed dignity not just for herself, but for all of us, press that like button to honor her strength. Leave a comment to encourage her mission, because when someone like Selena dares to stand alone, the least we can do is show that we see her, believe her, and stand with her. After the court verdicts, after the headlines faded, after the crowds went home, Selena Royce kept going. She had every reason to stop. Her best friend was gone. Her body still ached from the sniper's bullet. Her name was a constant target on hate forums and dark money watch lists, but she kept moving, chasing down the final shadows of the network that had tried to destroy her. What the public didn't see, what the cameras missed, was how deeply the system still fought to bury her. Selena had uncovered one last piece of the puzzle. A hidden property deed swap program disguised as an infrastructure project. It was buried deep inside a corporate shell called Eastbridge Renewal. It looked like a charity, helping rebuild communities on paper. In reality, it was a smokescreen. Black homeowners were being approached with fake citations, offered small checks to vacate their properties, and replaced with luxury condos before anyone could ask a question. Selena found herself standing on the streets where she once played as a child. Except now, the faces were gone. The soul of the neighborhood had been wiped out. Replaced. Whitewashed. Selena was determined to stop this and went to the state's top property commissioner. She carried a thick folder of proof, hoping, begging, that someone still had a conscience. But as she walked into the glass building downtown, she noticed something chilling. The receptionist had no name tag. Security didn't ask for her credentials. The elevators had no floor numbers. And when she entered the meeting room, the commissioner was already waiting, smiling in a way that made her stomach drop. "We know who you are," he said, tapping the folder before she could even speak. "And we know what you're trying to do. But you're not going to win this one." Selena froze. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just corruption. It was a trap. She stood up slowly, trying to leave, but the door behind her didn't open. The commissioner leaned forward. "You've cost a lot of powerful people a lot of money. This little campaign of yours ends here." Selena didn't panic. She stayed calm like she was trained to do. She pretended to listen, nodded politely, and waited for his guards to relax. Then, in one swift move, she grabbed the digital drive from her bag and flung it out the side window, shattering glass and sending it into the alley below, where Vanessa Tran was waiting in a parked car. As security rushed forward, Selena bolted. Not for the elevator, but for the stairwell. She raced down 12 flights, her breath sharp, her legs burning. She burst into the alley only to see the SUV already peeling off, tires screeching as 2 black sedans gave chase. Vanessa was out there, risking everything again, and Selena had no choice but to run alone. She made it back to a safe house, bruised and shaking. The data had been saved. But she hadn't escaped the threat. Not really. Because no matter how far she ran, the system always seemed one step ahead, always watching. She stared out the window that night, remembering the boy she once saved, the house they tore down, and the moment Marcus died for her. And she wondered, how many more would it take? How many more lives? And that's where you come in. If this story moved you, if you believe Selena deserves backup, hit that like button. Leave a comment, tell her to keep going, because when one woman risks everything to fight injustice, the least we can do is stand beside her, even if it's just with our voice. Let Selena Royce know she is not alone. Selena Royce thought she had survived the worst: bullets, betrayal, and public humiliation. But what followed her narrow escape from the commissioner's office broke her in ways she hadn't expected. The digital drive she tossed to Vanessa had entered federal hands. But instead of triggering more arrests, it vanished. No hearings, no press coverage, no justice. The media barely touched the story. Whistleblowers backed out, and the few who did speak up suddenly lost their jobs or disappeared altogether. It was as if the world had turned its back on everything she had fought for. Selena realized something even more painful than racism and corruption: indifference. People didn't just ignore the truth, they ran from it when it got too real. She tried to push forward. She submitted detailed reports. She knocked on the doors of lawmakers, but all she heard were polished replies. "We'll look into it," or "Now's not the right time." One night, she returned to her justice center and found the front windows shattered. Spray painted across the wall in blood-red letters were 3 words: "You were warned." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply picked up the pieces, boarded up the walls, and sat alone in the center of the building for hours. That place had been built from the ashes of her old home. Now it wasn't even safe. Her past was being erased all over again. Days later, Vanessa went missing. Again. But this time, there was no phone call, no message, only silence. Selena's hands shook as she dialed the hospitals, the precincts, the news desks. Nothing. She printed flyers herself. She walked through alleyways, knocking on doors, begging for leads. It was like Vanessa had never existed. Selena barely slept. Her eyes burned from tears she refused to let fall. She blamed herself for bringing Vanessa into this, getting too close to the truth, and believing justice could be so easily won. The pressure crushed her. Even the agents she once trained began to pull away. Her phone rarely rang anymore. And when it did, it was often a warning, not support. The loneliness became unbearable. One cold evening, she sat on the steps of the Justice Center, her head in her hands. She whispered to herself, maybe they were right. Maybe it's too big. But then a little girl approached her, maybe 7 years old. Brown skin, frizzy hair, and a backpack almost bigger than her. She handed Selena a folded drawing, a stick figure in a cape with the word hero scribbled in crayon above it. Selena smiled through trembling lips as the girl said, "My mommy said you saved our house. I want to be like you." That moment cracked something wide open. Not defeat, not despair, but resolve. Because even if the government didn't listen, even if the media turned away, the people were watching. The ones with nothing left still hoped for someone to fight for them, and Selena knew she couldn't stop. Not now. She found her strength again. She traced new leads. She reopened the investigation herself. And when she discovered that Eastbridge Renewal had already started operating in 2 more cities under different names, she packed her things, grabbed her notes, and prepared to start all over again. Alone, if she had to. And now it's your turn to decide. If you believe Selena's story matters, if her pain, courage, and fight moved you, please press the like button. Leave a comment. Remind her she's not invisible, not forgotten. Selena Royce gave up everything to tell the truth. The least we can do is make sure the world hears it. Selena Royce had nothing left to lose. Her home was long gone. Her closest ally, Marcus, had died shielding her from a sniper's bullet. Vanessa, her brave, relentless partner in truth, was missing. Maybe worse. And the system she had once believed could be redeemed had shown its true face. Cold, corrupt, and calculated. Still, she moved, not out of hope, but out of duty. She traveled to the next city targeted by Eastbridge Renewal, now under a new name, Clear Path Horizons. It was the same lie with a new smile. Flyers spoke of community revitalization, but the fine print told the truth. Long-time residents were being offered pennies for homes their families had built across generations. Selena arrived quietly, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, her identity hidden. The neighborhood reminded her of where she grew up. Tight porches, laughter from screen doors, gospel music playing through cracked windows. But it was vanishing. Every week, a new eviction. A new family was forced out. Selena moved quickly, gathering records, taking photos, and filming interviews. At night, she slept in her car. At dawn, she walked the streets, knocking on doors, offering what little protection she could. "Document everything," she told them. "Don't sign anything alone." People whispered her name like a secret prayer. Is it her? Is Selena Royce here? But Clearpath wasn't blind. They knew she was there. One night, she returned to her car and found the tires slashed. A note taped to the windshield. "This time, you won't leave." Her heart pounded. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sent everything she had gathered to 3 locations, encrypted and backed up just in case. That week, she held a community meeting inside a local church. Dozens of families came, their faces tired, their spirits wounded. Selena stood at the altar, not as an FBI director, but as a woman who had lost everything and still refused to be silent. "They want you to believe you're powerless," she said, trembling. "But you're not. You are the soul of this land. You are the story, and they are terrified of your truth." Tears ran down cheeks. People held hands. They stood one by one and shared their names, addresses, and pain. It was risky, dangerous even, but for the first time, they felt heard. Selena left the church that night with a binder full of testimonies and a fire in her chest. She was no longer just exposing corruption. She was building resistance. But then the attack came. 2 nights later, the church was firebombed. Flames ripped through the stained glass windows. The pews were engulfed. Selena arrived as smoke poured into the street, people screaming, sirens wailing. She dropped to her knees, choking back sobs. Not just because of the loss, but because this was what the system did when it was cornered. It burned what it could not silence. And yet, she still didn't stop. She rebuilt. She called more meetings. She spoke to more journalists. She named names. And though threats poured in daily, she stood taller, stronger. And now, she needs you. If this story breaks your heart, if Selena's courage moves something in your soul, press the like button now. Leave a comment to let her know she's not alone. Share this story so others see what she's risking to protect people like you and me. Selena Royce is still fighting, still standing. Not because it's safe, but because it's right. Will you stand with her? No one knew where Selena Royce went after the church burned down. The media thought she'd vanished, that she had finally given up after risking everything, her safety, legacy, and life. But the truth was far more unbelievable. Selena didn't disappear. She went underground. Selena worked under the radar in a secret safe house buried deep in the heart of New Orleans, using burner phones, encrypted servers, and contacts from her FBI past to launch something no one saw coming. A covert network called Project Sovereign. Its mission? To track, expose, and dismantle the shadow corporations behind land theft and racial displacement, not just in the US, but around the world. Her investigation had uncovered something far more significant than she imagined. A global web of developers, political insiders, and offshore entities connected by money and protected by silence. Every name she uncovered came with danger. Every step she took meant risking her life. And then she did something bold, something no one would believe unless they saw it. She hacked into an exclusive real estate blockchain used by elite investors to move stolen properties through encrypted transactions silently. She did it from a coffee shop, using nothing but a laptop patched with custom firmware and a satellite proxy built by a former tech whistleblower she met in Atlanta. In one night, she exposed over 2,000 property transfers, all tied to corporations that once claimed to be revitalizing minority communities. But she didn't stop there. Using a new identity, Selena booked a first-class ticket to Zurich and walked straight into an international development summit. Dressed in white, with her hair pinned back and her accent disguised, she presented herself as a consultant from a firm no one could trace. She sat beside billionaires, politicians, CEOs, some of whom had ordered the very demolitions that destroyed lives back home. Quietly, she recorded conversations, collected business cards, and photographed private documents left unattended in leather folders. Then came the biggest twist. On the summit's last day, she anonymously leaked a dossier to every attendee, detailing the properties, families, and communities each company had destroyed. The conference fell into chaos. Some denied everything. Others fled. And the name Selena Royce started trending again, not in America but worldwide. She had exposed a city's corruption and a global industry built on stolen land and silenced voices. When she returned to the US, she didn't go home, because she didn't have one. Instead, she drove state to state, wearing a scarf to hide her face, meeting activists, lawyers, and survivors. She began building something bigger, a new coalition of land defenders, tech whistleblowers, and young community leaders trained to investigate, resist, and rebuild. She taught them how to track illegal deeds, expose fake nonprofits, and spot forged zoning paperwork. She was planting seeds in the soil that they tried to poison. And now she's watching, waiting, knowing the system will try again. But this time she's not just one woman. She's a movement. If you're still listening, if this story makes your heart race and your fists clench, if Selena Royce's courage inspires you, press the like button. Leave a comment to remind her that the world is paying attention. She didn't vanish. She evolved. And somewhere, right now, Selena Royce is still fighting. Quietly, brilliantly, fearlessly. Let her know she's not doing it alone. Selena Royce never asked to be a symbol. She never wanted the spotlight, the headlines, or the titles. All she ever wanted was justice, for the boy she saved that night on the sidewalk, for Marcus Reed, who died shielding her from a sniper's bullet, for Vanessa Try, whose apartment was firebombed, for the families whose homes were bulldozed in the name of revitalization. But what began as a stand against one racist officer exploded into a war against a system built to silence people who looked like her. When she first stepped between a white cop and a trembling black teenager, she had no idea that moment would cost her everything: her home, her peace, her safety. The pain started small. A zoning notice, a legal threat, a smear campaign. Then came the demolition of her house, the sniper fire, the betrayals from colleagues who once called her director. But she never backed down. She held her ground through tear gas, lies, and even death. She confronted city officials, faced down developers with blood on their hands, and stood in courtrooms where her pain was on full display. Each time she told the truth, the system pushed back harder. And yet she stood taller. She remembered her father's final words before police beat him to death in front of his school. Justice does not come from a gun. It comes from patience and intellect. Those words became her armor. When they called her angry, she answered with evidence. When they tried to erase her, she came back louder. And when they wanted to kill her, she survived. Every time. But behind the headlines were nights no one saw. Nights when Selena curled up in the back seat of a rental car, too afraid to sleep in the same place twice. Nights she clutched a photograph of Marcus, whispering apologies she could never take back. She carried the guilt of every life touched by her fight, even though the truth was, it was the system that failed them, not her. Still, she bore the weight anyway, because leaders do that. They bleed so others can live. And finally, after risking her life again and again, something changed. Selena's relentless pursuit uncovered the final link. Offshore accounts, fake charities, and a massive coordinated scheme spanning 5 countries. With help from international allies, she triggered a wave of arrests, including the resignation of high-ranking officials. And then, in a quiet but powerful press conference, the United Nations recognized her efforts, calling her work a global model for land justice and anti-corruption reform. Once reduced to ashes, Her rebuilt home was now a permanent justice center, visited by families from every walk of life. But the moment that meant the most to her didn't happen on a stage. It happened in a crowded hallway of the center, when the same boy she once saved, now taller, confident, eyes full of life, hugged her and whispered, "You gave me my future back." That was when Selena finally cried. So now you know the truth. The road she walked wasn't paved. It was carved from fire, fear, and faith. She didn't just survive racism. She exposed, dismantled, and replaced it with something more substantial: hope. If her story touched your heart, press that like button. Leave a comment for Selena. Tell her she matters. Tell her she's not alone. Because what she did wasn't just for her. It was for all of us still waiting to be heard. Even after the world began to see Selena Royce as a hero, her battles didn't end. They just changed shape. The headlines faded, the applause quieted, but the resistance she faced became colder, more calculated. In the shadows of her victory, powerful forces began plotting again, not with bulldozers or bullets this time, but with silence, lawsuits, and surveillance. Though the United Nations had honored her and communities across the country had found hope in her story, the same system that once demolished her home was now trying to dismantle her credibility, piece by piece. Whispers circulated in legal circles. Anonymous ethics complaints flooded federal agencies. They called her too emotional, too radical, too dangerous. But Selena had already lost everything once, and survived. She wasn't afraid of their tactics. Still, the pressure was relentless. She faced lawsuit after lawsuit, frivolous, baseless, designed only to drain her strength and resources. She received daily threats disguised as subpoenas, her name dragged through the mud in political commentary. "Selena Royce is leading a vigilante movement," one outlet claimed. "She's dividing the nation," another said. Behind each accusation was a shadowy voice with wealth and influence, terrified of what she represented. Uncompromising truth from someone they couldn't control. And then came the ultimate betrayal. A member of her internal team, someone she had mentored, fed, and trusted, was revealed to be leaking information to corporate lobbyists. The betrayal cut deeper than any sniper's bullet. Selena shut herself away in the Justice Center for weeks, barely speaking, her eyes sunken with exhaustion and disbelief. She walked the empty halls at night, touching the walls rebuilt from the ashes of her home, wondering how long it would all last. She had given everything, her name, her safety, her peace. And still, the world found new ways to make her bleed. One evening, after hours of reviewing court documents and stolen memos, she stumbled upon an encrypted message in a forgotten folder. It was a warning sent by a whistleblower inside the Department of Urban Planning. A new initiative had been quietly launched: Green District Expansion. On the surface, it promised clean energy and housing investments, but buried in its details was a clause that allowed private companies to seize underutilized land without due process. It was the same story again, dressed in eco-friendly colors. Selena stared at the screen in silence. Then, with trembling fingers, she called Vanessa, recently found alive after weeks in hiding. Her spirit dimmed, but not extinguished. Together they gathered survivors from every past battle, mothers whose homes had been crushed, teenagers raised in shelters, veterans with nowhere to go, and they formed something new. The People's Coalition for Land Defense. No longer reactive, no longer scattered. This was organized resistance, led by those who had lived the pain firsthand. Still, the pain didn't leave Selena. At night, She dreamed of her father calling out for help. She dreamed of Marcus whispering, "Don't stop." Sometimes she woke up gasping for air, overwhelmed by everything she'd carried for too long. But each morning, she rose. Each time a family rang her center's bell asking for help, she opened the door herself. And now, her story needs you. If her courage moves you and pain opens your eyes, press that like button. Leave a comment for Selena. Let her know she's not carrying this weight alone because the system may try to erase her. But with your voice, her story will live on. Her fight becomes ours. Selena Royce stood in front of a crowded gymnasium, her voice hoarse from speaking, her eyes heavy from sleepless nights. Around her were families holding eviction notices, photographs of lost homes, and children who had never known stability. These weren't strangers. These were the people she had sworn to protect. The ones who reminded her of her childhood. The quiet tears her mother cried when police refused to investigate her father's murder. And now, as the new Green District expansion threatened to erase entire communities under the banner of progress, Selena stood as their shield, their last line of defense. But the weight was crushing. She had fought so long and hard, and now it felt like the war was starting again. That morning, she had received yet another threat. This time, not anonymous. It came from a smiling congressman on national television who called her coalition an extremist uprising in disguise. He demanded a federal probe into her organization, accusing her of misusing public funds, faking reports, and inciting division. Selena watched the broadcast from her tiny office, her hands clenched into fists, her jaw locked. They were doing it again, smearing her, twisting the truth. She turned her fight for justice into something dangerous in the eyes of the world. But what the cameras didn't see was what happened after. She drove alone to a burned-down church that once held her first community meeting. It stood now as a skeleton, charred beams and broken stained glass, but it was holy ground to her. She stepped over debris, knelt where the altar once stood, and whispered the names of everyone she'd lost. Marcus, her father. Every family is displaced. Her hands trembled. She wanted to scream, to give up. But then her phone buzzed. A message. A photo. A group of children stands in front of the rebuilt Justice Center, holding a banner made from old bedsheets. In shaky paint, it read, "We stand with Selena." Tears welled in her eyes, unstoppable this time. It wasn't the buildings or the protests or even the verdicts that gave her strength. It was that reminder that somewhere, someone still believed in her. And with that, she stood. She wiped her face, and she kept moving. That night, she marched into City Hall unannounced, armed with a report exposing how Green District contractors were secretly backed by offshore developers with a history of human rights violations. Cameras followed. Her voice echoed through the marble halls. "You think you can hide behind new language, policies, and colors? I've seen this before. I've survived this before. And I will burn it all down with truth." And her words weren't rage. They were fire, and everyone in the room felt it. But the battle is not over, and Selena can't do this alone. If her story touched you, if you believe what she's doing matters, press that like button right now. Leave a comment to encourage her. Let her know that she is not alone in this fight. Because Selena Royce isn't just fighting for herself anymore. She's fighting for every family ever pushed to the margins. Every child is forced to grow up too fast. Every voice they tried to silence. She's still standing, still fighting, still refusing to bow. And with your support, she'll never have to fight in silence again. They thought Selena Royce had finally gone quiet. After the smears, the legal attacks, and the smear campaigns labeling her a radical, The powerful forces behind the Green District expansion believed she had been broken. But they didn't understand one thing. Selena never stopped. She only changed the battlefield. Disguised in plain sight, she vanished from headlines. She re-emerged in the underworld of real estate manipulation, where billion-dollar deals happened in shadowy boardrooms and on private islands, far from public scrutiny. With a stolen ID and an encrypted passport, Selena boarded a private jet to Luxembourg, posing as a regional land investor. What she was really after was access to a digital black book, known in covert activist circles as the Ledger, an internal database of property acquisitions tied to unethical land seizures, forged documents, and racial targeting. She had to bluff her way into a high-security estate owned by the notorious Van Marks Consortium to get it. No FBI badge, no backup, just her wit, nerves, and years of training. In the middle of a lavish gala, dressed in a sleek emerald gown, Selena slipped away from the crowd, broke into the back office, and hacked into a cloud server protected by retina scans and voice locks. The moment the download completed, she heard footsteps. Security. She leapt from a second-story balcony into a lily pond, shattered her heel, and ran barefoot into the woods, her dress torn, laptop clutched to her chest. No one knew what happened that night. No press, no leaks. But 3 weeks later, a global wave of resignations began hitting major development firms, CEOs and politicians named in the Ledger stepping down for personal reasons. Whispers of a mysterious leak swept through elite circles. But no one knew it was her. In the U.S., Selena used the data to alert activists in over 30 cities. She coordinated land take-back movements, where displaced families returned to empty lots with deeds proving ownership. In Memphis, she stood beside an 82-year-old woman who had lost her home to false zoning laws and helped her reclaim it after 15 years. In Oakland, she exposed a city official who secretly funneled land contracts to his brother's shell company. And in Miami, she recorded a real estate magnate confessing to demographic cleansing, then released the footage online. It went viral in 6 hours. Selena was everywhere. And yet, still invisible to those who feared her most. But there was one mystery even her allies didn't know. The notebook. Marcus Reed's notebook, which she kept locked in a fireproof box. In the back was a single, unfinished map, hand-sketched, cryptic, and marked with strange symbols. A path Marcus believed would lead to a secret fund used by corrupt city officials to bankroll these demolitions for decades. A fund buried so deep it didn't exist in any database, only in whispers passed between dead men. Selena followed that map. She went to the Louisiana swamps, an abandoned courthouse in Kansas, even a ghost town in Arizona, where old bank vaults held forgotten ledgers. She chased myths, cracked codes, and pieced together Marcus's trail. What she discovered at the end was too explosive to name. Yet. But she knew this wasn't over. So if you're hearing this now, if you've followed Selena's journey from the day they tore down her home to this moment, press that like button. Drop a comment to let her know you believe in her, because the fight isn't just about what's been lost. It's about what's still hidden. And Selena Royce is getting closer than anyone ever dared. Let her know she's not alone. Selena Royce never set out to be a revolutionary. She simply refused to look away. From the moment she stepped in to protect a terrified black boy from a white officer's gun, her life unraveled and transformed in equal measure. That moment of defiance, against the sneer, the badge, the centuries of racial cruelty behind that officer's threat, set into motion a chain of events that would strip her of everything she thought was safe. Her home was bulldozed. Her best friend was killed. Her name was smeared across headlines. And still, she stood tall. Because deep down, Selena had made a choice. If justice wouldn't come quietly, she would raise her voice loud enough to shatter silence. She carried her scars like armor. Each betrayal by the system that was supposed to protect her only hardened her resolve. And yet, the world didn't know half of what she endured. When the government branded her a threat, she couldn't walk freely. She couldn't eat at restaurants without looking over her shoulder. She moved from city to city, sleeping in borrowed rooms and cars, hunted not for committing a crime, but for telling the truth. And what was that truth? That racism wasn't just a matter of hate. It was built into the blueprints of cities, into the contracts of real estate empires, into the zoning laws designed to erase people who looked like her. She had seen it with her own eyes. Grandmothers pushed from their homes with forged signatures. Legal threats silence single mothers. Children are growing up surrounded by construction fences instead of playgrounds. And behind it all, smiling politicians and soulless corporations whisper words like development and revitalization while robbing communities of their roots. Selena didn't just fight back, she outwitted them. She infiltrated conferences, stole documents from guarded vaults, and followed the mysterious map Marcus left behind. Her fingers trembled every time she opened another folder, revealing proof of decades of racial cleansing disguised as urban progress. And with each new revelation, the world began to see her not as a radical, but as a reckoning. She found the fund. Hidden in layered shell accounts tied to dead politicians and offshore havens, a financial trail of generational theft. She exposed it in a live stream viewed by 18 million people. The world watched as names once considered untouchable fell, resigned, indicted, disgraced. But Selena didn't celebrate, because for every corrupt man who fell, there were still families grieving, still mothers without homes, still memories of Marcus's blood on her hands. She returned to where it began. Larksville. The sidewalk where that black boy once stood, trembling before a loaded weapon. The same street where she lost everything. Now, it was filled with murals. The Justice Center she built stood firm. And standing outside was that same boy, now a teenager, holding a sign that read, "She saved me." Selena broke down. Years of pain, sacrifice, and silence released in a single moment of peace. And now, if you've followed her story, from the first racist insult to the final courtroom victory, press that like button, leave a comment. Let Selena know you've walked this road with her. Because this wasn't just her fight, it was ours. And justice didn't come easy. It came because someone dared to say, "Not this time." Let Selena hear you. Let her know you see her, and that her story matters. As the sun set behind the Justice Center that now stood where her home had once been reduced to rubble, Selena Royce walked alone through the community garden she helped rebuild. Children played where bulldozers once roared. Families gathered where silence once reigned. Murals of resistance, of hope, of Marcus and Vanessa now lined the walls, each one a reminder that her pain hadn't been for nothing. She had faced it all. Racist threats, violent retaliation, betrayal from within, and the cold weight of isolation. But in the end, she didn't just survive. She changed everything. Selena didn't win by yelling louder. She won by never backing down. She used her mind, scars, and unwavering courage to expose what influential people prayed would stay hidden. She tore down the lie that justice only belongs to the powerful. And most of all, she proved that one voice, if strong enough, if true enough, can echo through every courtroom, city hall, and neighborhood across the country. Her journey wasn't perfect. It was full of failure, fear, and unimaginable loss. But that's what made it real. And that's why her story matters. So here's what we take from Selena's fight. Don't wait to be permitted to speak. Don't let fear stop you from protecting what's right. And never underestimate the power of a single act of courage, because sometimes justice begins with just one person saying no. That moment when she stood between a white officer and a scared black boy, that was the spark. Everything after, the pain, the trials, the victories, grew from that choice. You may not face the same battles, but in your own life, you will be tested. You will see wrongs, you will feel fear. And when that moment comes, ask yourself, what would Selena Royce do? Because the truth is, Selena lives in all of us. In every teacher who stands up for their student. In every neighbor who refuses to stay silent. In every young person who believes their voice deserves to be heard. The system may try to silence you. The world may try to convince you it's not worth the fight. But justice doesn't come easy. It comes when ordinary people do extraordinary things, even when no one's watching. And if Selena's story has moved you, if you've felt her fear, grief, and power, press the like button right now. Leave a comment to let her know you stand with her. Tell her that her fight mattered, that her voice was heard. And if you want more stories like this, true stories of resilience, resistance, and transformation, subscribe to the channel. Be the reason these voices continue to rise. Be the one who spreads the truth. Because justice doesn't end with one victory, it's a journey we walk together. And thanks to Selena Royce, we now know the way. Like, comment, subscribe, support the story, stand with Selena, and always, always remember, the fight for justice begins with you.